All right. Let's move it on to Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football with Chip Kelly and those Bruins on the field to erase the memory of 2018 and look forward to this fall and what the possibilities are. Tony, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Mark, how are you? Good show tonight.
I'm doing well. I appreciate it. Yeah, there's a lot of fire for March and for us being so separated from actual football on the field. People still have their allegiances and they burn brightly.
Exactly. Got to appreciate a guy like Vernon who comes with all the receipts for Auburn football. The guy's got it all going on.
Yes, he does. He will be invited back, as you have been. You just have one big invite, Tony. There don't have to be any small invites. It's one open door to you.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. We appreciate your insight. So UCLA's been on the field here for a few days. What is Chip trying to get accomplished?
There's a lot of question marks, which you would expect coming off a 3-9 season. Obviously, they've had a lot of attrition, as we noted in our column yesterday at Last Word on College Football. 35 players gone since Chip Kelly took over in December of 2017. Some of them are grad transfers, and as you and I have discussed repeatedly, grad level student athletes don't stay where they currently are. They've got one last chance to measure their own value somewhere else, and they generally take it and kind of define their own destiny one last time in college, and they leave. So UCLA's had a few of those. They've had a couple of early departures for the NFL. They've had a couple of medical retirements, one recently, and then they've got people who've just left with either of their own volition or of Chip's. And a couple of them are a little bit interesting that we can get into when we're talking about the different positions. But you lose 35 players. You sign a recruiting class that is less than the maximum allowed. And you lose those players. You get the graduation. And you're looking at a spring camp roster of about 70 players, which is generally what you get when you're on probation. You've got scholarship reductions. And so there are some depth questions. There are some positions where they are very well stocked, but others where the depth is razor thin. And so Chip's got to kind of see what he's got in the trenches, at the second and third levels at those positions.
So the player that gets the most scrutiny is, of course, the quarterback position, and with a star in the making, possibly in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. We will start there in regards to your thoughts about what you saw last year, what you expect to see this spring, and how steep the competition is going to be for him.
Well, here's the challenge with the quarterback position, and look, we've been to camp. They've been in pads twice so far this spring. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson has looked better than he did last year, but it is the expected improvement from a freshman who'd never played in college and who was splitting time because of injuries, who is now the ordained leader at the position going into spring camp. He has improved. His delivery in the pocket is a little bit quicker. His throws are coming a little bit quicker. His decision making through the progressions seems to come a little bit more, not to be redundant, but it's a little bit more decisive. He doesn't look as lost, going through the progressions as he did at times last year. So he looks significantly better in camp. He's running out of the pocket with a little bit more ease. All of those things are good. All of those things bode well for UCLA. Here's the challenge. You are one DTR sprained ankle away from disaster. And I say that with no disrespect to the other quarterbacks, but what you have right now behind him is Austin Burton, who this is his second camp. He's never taken a college snap in a game. He looks adequate, but he looks like it's his first time really taking significant snaps with the second string, with the twos, as they call them. because his decision making is slower in the pocket, significantly so. The ability to throw on the run has yet to be proven in a consistent basis. When he makes the decision to leave the pocket, it is specifically to run. It is not to still keep your eyes downfield and look for other options. It is specifically, I'm tucking, I'm running, plays over. Um, so they've got some significant challenges there. They've got the freshman Chase Griffin, who, from Texas, who was the Gatorade Player of the Year down there. He is not medically cleared to throw. He's got an injury. So he's mimicking plays in camp, but it is unlikely he will see any significant action in camp, if any at all. So you've got some real challenges at the quarterback position. I think you and I had talked about it after National Signing Day in February. One of the key elements missing was getting an experienced junior college transfer or grad transfer quarterback. Now, that's not to say that possibility that doesn't still exist. You and I see the transfer portals and know that, players are coming and going like it's a 7-Eleven store right now. But there is a lack of viable experience behind DTR. And with an offensive line that is very, very, very thin in depth, you're running a pretty big risk right now. DTR looks terrific so far, significantly improved, no question about it. Question is, what happens after that? What's next?
We got Tony Siracusa on the line from Last Word on College Football to talk UCLA with the Bruins in camp under Chip Kelly in season number 2. So I will liken the management of the roster and the number of scholarships available and the number filled to a general manager in professional sports that has to weigh the personnel and the talent on the roster versus what they can afford in regards to the cap or the limitations of the ownership and what they're given to spend. And so how does a head football coach at that level with the resources that he has get himself into a predicament, or is this something that he inherited and he needs a couple of years to work himself out of?
I'm gonna take a cop out answer and say it's a little bit of both. Look, some of the players that he inherited weren't suited for his program, for what he wanted to run, what he wanted to do. Some of them were not suited for the type of structure and discipline that he wanted to instill in the program. Some of the players who have left were players who were suspended once or even twice, and he made it clear at that point there wasn't going to be a next time. There wasn't going to be a third time. So there was really no place for them at that point. Some of them left because they weren't getting the playing time they wanted. There's one young man who it's turned into a little bit of an interesting sidebar of a story. Mike Juarez, who was a highly touted linebacker coming out of high school a few years ago here locally in Southern California. He missed his first year because he had some personal family issues that he needed time to resolve. And it was a struggle with Jim Mora. Jim Mora actually recommended that he get professional help and so on to get through it. And, nobody really knows how far that delved into. But Mike came back, but has suffered through a lot of injuries. And this last year, in 2018, he saw the field a handful of games, but again, injuries, concussion, maybe even 2, depends on who you want to listen to. The UCLA issued a medical retirement announcement for him, as well as defensive lineman Rick Wade. And Wade acknowledged that was the case. He was having to give up football because of a neck injury that was going to require surgery. He was done. It's a significant loss for UCLA. Mike Juarez, however, refuted UCLA's stance. UCLA, of course, is not going to go specific into a player's injuries. A lot of colleges won't, and Chip Kelly won't, and the school won't, especially someone who's been advised to medically retire. There are privacy issues, and it's just not something UCLA wants to delve into. Mike Juarez, however, did not shy away from it last week. He went public on his social media pages and acknowledged that the UCLA doctors advised him to medically retire and they will not clear him for this upcoming season. So he's not medically retiring. He's putting his name in the transfer portal and going to another school because he considered their medical opinion bupkis, to put it politely. So there are these. There's Jalen Phillips, who was a prized 5-star defensive end recruit a few years ago, has played 10 games over the last 2 years total because of injuries, is advised to medically retire and acknowledges he's likely to medically retire. And 2 weeks later, his name shows up in the transfer portal and he's at Miami now. So there's some weirdness about some of the departures. Some of them are just standard departures. You don't have a place here. I don't like playing for you. We're going to part ways. Some of these are just, there's a few of them that are just go to being a little weird, a little hinky. And so it messes with the depth. There are a few positions where UCLA has a treasure trove of talent. They are miles deep at running back. They've got, Joshua Kelly, for a moment or two tinkered with the idea of putting his name in for the NFL draft. He came back. They had a lot of talent coming back anyway with Kashmir Allen and Martell Irby, but you get a 1,000-yard rusher returning to the lineup for his senior season, and that is just huge. So, they've got some good young players coming in also with Keegan Jones and so forth. So they are very, very deep at running back. They're very deep at wide receiver. Theo Howard came back. I got to tell you, he's if you haven't watched UCLA or you haven't familiarized yourself with UCLA that much, this is a guy who deserves your attention. He was routinely in Jim Mora's doghouse his freshman year. Elite speed, really good hands, constantly in Mora's doghouse. A little bit more playing time his sophomore year, made a big impact in the USC game, taking on Iman Marshall one-on-one, beating him routinely in that game. Had a huge season last year with no drops the entire season. I mean, just great statistics, and decided to come back. UCLA loses Caleb Wilson, the tight end, who was kind of every quarterback safety net, whether it was Wilton Spate or whether it was DTR. He was like the safety blanket for both quarterbacks. He's gone, but they are super deep at receiver. We're seeing Chase Cota, the sophomore, get a lot of time with the ones right now. And we're seeing a big impact from Kyle Phillips, who played last year as a freshman, but probably going to see a lot more time this year. So Demetric Felton as well got a lot of catches last year, and he's back. So very, very deep at receiver and at tight end. That offensive line is scary thin once again, like it was last year. They lost Andre James to the NFL. Not sure losing him is that big of an impact. He didn't have a very good season last year as it is. But they just don't have a lot of depth. They've got a couple of good freshmen coming in who won't be in until summer. And so you've got some issues there on that part of the offense. And again, we go back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. When your season depends on protecting DTR and your offensive line is thin in depth, you don't have a lot of wiggle room.